My name is Rowan Delacourt, 32 years old. Stability, for me, is measured in spreadsheets and sunrise runs along the Boise River. The kind of life you can set a watch by. Coffee at 7:02, shoes by the door at 7:10, a desk plant that thrives because I remember the exact day of the week it needs water. I'm a financial analyst, which means I read patterns until they confess. It also means I know when something looks friendly but isn't. Like my mother's text. It arrived on a Wednesday at 4:11 p.m., short enough to feel rehearsed. Come to Idaho Falls for Thanksgiving. We miss you. No exclamation marks. No, how are you? Just an invitation shaped like a summons. I stared at it until the words blurred and the dots on my screen stayed stubbornly still. 2 years since I'd last crossed their doorway. 2 years since the kind of holiday where my brother told stories and everyone laughed on cue while I stacked plates and rationed my words. I had a different plan. Sawtooth trails, a borrowed tent, the big sky that makes you forget zip codes. My friends had already teased me for being camp spreadsheet. I was ready to go. Then I pictured the pies cooling on my mother's counter and my father's bad jokes that used to make me roll my eyes and secretly smile. Nostalgia speaks in the voice of things you wish were true. I texted back, I'll be there. Packing for Idaho Falls, I chose one sweater that made me look like I tried, without auditioning for a role I'd never get. I placed gifts in the back seat, a good bottle for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, a finance book for my sister-in-law because it felt neutral and, if I'm honest, because I wanted to be seen without being asked for anything. Halfway down the highway, the high desert opened, and my chest did too. Then a thought landed hard. My sister-in-law works at a bank. She's made career small talk about compliance, privacy, access. The way she'd once asked, how do you automate your savings again? High yield or laddered CDs? Like a compliment, like a test. The house looked the same. Pale siding, meticulous shrubs, the wind chime that always sounded a half step off. Dad opened the door before I knocked. He hugged me with the kind of cheer that clangs. You made it, he said, a little too loud. Mom took my coat, eyes bright and scanning, like she was memorizing columns. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and truce. My brother was already posted by the fireplace, his hand on the mantel as if the room needed anchoring. His wife stood beside him, posture perfect, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Look at you, he said, as if I were a headline he'd written. I handed out the gifts. Dad praised the wine's label, Mom draped the scarf, and murmured, lovely. My sister-in-law flipped the finance book open with the casual competence of someone reading a personnel file. Dinner sparkled the way stage lights do, pretty from the seats, hot and blinding where you stand. Turkey, potatoes, green beans with almonds. Dad started a story about a neighbor's boat and ended it with a pun he adored. Everyone laughed in the right place. When the questions turned to me, they arrived orderly, almost polite. How's Boise? Mom asked. How's work? Dad added. You must have a smart plan, my sister-in-law said lightly. With your salary, you could retire early if you keep your savings rate up. A nod to what she shouldn't know. A test balloon to see if I'd pop it. I sipped water. I'm careful, I said, and left it there. My brother launched into his latest venture, a game changer, some real estate pivot that sounded like a TED Talk pitched to a mirror. His wife chimed in with soft affirmations. Dad beamed at him with a father's weathered pride. Mom asked me how long the drive took, if I still liked my apartment, whether I'd thought about moving closer to family. The mashed potatoes tasted like childhood. The gravy tasted like a closing argument. Every time I tried to redirect, to the river trail, to the coffee shop that knows my order, they steered us back to my job, my routines, my savings. The word hung in the steam like an extra place setting. Responsible is a compliment until it becomes a contract you never signed. Outside, November pressed its face to the window. Inside, the fireplace clicked with that old, familiarly uneven rhythm, like a lie trying to even out. I kept noticing small things I couldn't unknot. Mom cutting her turkey in exact squares, as if staying inside lines. Dad's laugh landing a half-second late. My brother's knee bouncing under the table. My sister-in-law's eyes, which didn't land on me so much as through me, as if calibrating. We cleared the plates. Mom said, brightly but breathless, let's do gifts. She brought out a small box for me, wrapped neat and tight with ribbon that left no fingerprints. I'd brought them wine and silk and paper with printed advice. In return, they handed me a weight I hadn't yet felt, disguised as celebration. I took the box. It sounded like paper when I shook it once, very lightly, the way you do when you don't want to look suspicious. Dad's hand found his glass. His knuckles whitened along the stem. My brother stopped bouncing his knee. My sister-in-law's smile became a line. I slid my thumbnail under the tape. The ribbon sighed. "Open it," Mom said, and her voice had the same tone she used when I was 12 and lied about finishing my homework. Soft, practiced, sure I'd comply. Eyed. Paper parted, the room leaned in. Numbers live behind everything, even love. I didn't know yet what was printed inside, only that the entire evening had been an equation, and I was about to see the answer key. Someone else had written in my name. The fireplace clicked again, one beat late. I unfolded the first edge of the paper, and then the second. The paper inside the box was folded twice, the kind of bureaucratic origami that hopes you won't notice the knife until you've already bled. I unfolded it, and the font shouted without raising its voice. Bank letterhead, past due statements, principal balance, $250,000, and a neat line describing a commercial obligation related to a startup. My eyes snagged on my brother's name, then the word delinquent, stark as a bruise. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew what this was. Dad leaned forward like a foreman delivering a verdict. "It's your brother's debt," he said. "The business didn't work out. We need you to cover it." Need, not ask. A weight passed from his hands to mine like it had always belonged to me. Mom's smile had evaporated. She called up her softest voice, the one threaded with church-quiet righteousness. "Rowan, sweetheart, you've always been the responsible one. You're doing so well. This is what families do. They help." Across from me, my brother's face was a mask designed to pass as humility. "It's temporary," he murmured, not meeting my eyes. "Just to bridge the gap." My sister-in-law didn't bother with humility. She held my gaze the way a scanner reads a barcode. "It wouldn't even dent you," she said lightly. "I mean, with your numbers." The room tilted. "My numbers?" I asked, careful, each syllable set down like a glass on granite. She blinked as if I was being coy, then shrugged the way people do when they're about to pretend ethics is just a mood. "I work at the bank," she said. "I've seen your accounts." A beat. "You're fine." The violation landed like cold water down my spine. My savings were mine, paychecks alchemized into quiet security, into choosing peace on a Tuesday or a plane ticket when the world got loud. Years of saying no to easy yeses poured into a vault I'd assumed had walls. Hearing it summarized as "you're fine" felt like watching someone pick the lock on my front door with a smile. I set the notice on my lap, felt the paper's cheap fibers catch against my skin. "No." Dad blinked. "What?" "No," I repeated clearer. "I'm not paying his debt." Silence arrived like snowfall. Soft. Everywhere. Erasing paths. My brother's knee started bouncing again. Mom's hands cinched together on the edge of the coffee table. "Rowan," she tried, "we raised you to fix it," I said, and the words didn't shake. "I know." My brother's charm cracked. "So you're just going to let us lose everything?" he snapped. "Over money?" "Over lies," I thought, but I didn't say it yet. "It's not my obligation," I said instead. "It's yours." My sister-in-law's smile thinned into a line. "Ungrateful is an ugly look," she murmured, as if trying on a slur in the mirror. Something in Dad's face changed. His jaw set, a flush lifted from his collar to his cheekbones, as if rage were a fever rising. "You're sitting on a pile of cash," he hissed, "and your brother's life is coming apart. What kind of daughter refuses to help family?" The old script. Responsible as duty, daughter as wallet. I picked up the paper again and let my eyes skate the line. $250,000. Failed startup. It didn't read like failure. It read like camouflage. My mind began to pattern match. The Instagram brags, the sudden car, the weekends away. Variables that didn't solve to struggling founder so much as man sprinting downhill in silk shoes. I tucked that suspicion away for later. "I'm not paying," I said once more, because sometimes the third time is the only one that counts. Dad stood, chair legs shrieking across hardwood. He gripped his wine glass, red, heavy. His favorite decanter vintage poured to the generous lip. His knuckles brightened to bone under skin. You ungrateful child, he said, voice fraying. After everything. After everything I earned, I said quietly. The glass moved before I believed it would. A hard, fast arc. Cold sweetness across my face. The sting inside my eyes. The immediate, sticky chill as wine soaked into my sweater and through to my skin. Time split. The clink of the empty glass against the table. Mom's intake of breath, sharp, then swallowed, replaced by a stare as flat as shut blinds. If you won't help your brother, she said, her voice newly sharpened on each syllable, you are not welcome in this house. Get out. I was very still. Wine dripped from my chin into my collarbone, trailed down my wrists as I lowered the page. In the fireplace, a log settled with a hollow pop. The wind chime outside counted the gusts wrong. My brother stared past me like there was a camera he preferred, and my sister-in-law looked satisfied in the small, petty way of a person who has mistaken cruelty for power. Okay, I said, and it surprised me how easy the word felt. I folded the notice the way I'd found it. Twice. Neat. I slid it back into the box it came in. I set the box on the table, centered, like a sacrament I refused to take. Then I stood. No one moved to help me with my coat. I didn't ask. At the doorway I paused, not for them, never again for them, but to acknowledge the version of me that had kept hoping. The girl who thought pie and jokes could save a house that had quietly been on fire for years. I didn't mourn her. I thanked her for getting me this far and left her on the threshold like a pair of shoes that didn't fit anymore. Outside, the cold pinned me crisp and alert. Wine stung where it met wind, and I laughed once, small, incredulous, at the civility of weather compared to people. I crossed the porch, each step steady. Behind me, the door clicked shut. Not a slam, a decision. In the car, my hands shook for exactly 3 breaths. Then they stopped. I turned the heat on low and watched my breath ghost the windshield before it disappeared. The night stretched ahead, highway ribbon, dark field, dim farmhouses with yellow windows like eyes that chose to stay shut. My phone lit in the cup holder, bright as a flare. Grandpa. I stared at his name until the second ring became the third. He never called this late. He never called unannounced. The screen kept vibrating against the plastic, a polite insistence. Some part of me, the part that reads patterns until they confess, knew this wasn't a condolence call. I answered. Grandpa? His voice came through, low and steady, the sound of an old door that still holds. Rowan, he said, you need to know what they've really done. The heater hummed low, filling the silence as Grandpa's voice cracked through the static. They lied to you, he said, words steady but freighted. That debt your father shoved in your hands, it wasn't for a failed startup. It's gambling money, Rowan. Casinos, cars, Vegas. I closed my eyes, letting the words hit. Gambling? Yes, he said, the syllable falling like a gavel. He lost $250,000 chasing easy winnings. Your father knew. He helped him hide it. They planned to make you pay it off to keep the family's name clean. The world outside my windshield blurred into streaks of highway lights and frost. I could still feel the sting of wine on my skin, now dry but sticky, like it refused to let me forget. You're sure? I saw the transfers, Grandpa said, from the joint account your father manages. Flights to Nevada, wire payments to online casinos, and I heard them talking before you arrived, your brother panicking, your father saying, she's the responsible one, she'll do it quietly. My stomach twisted, the words tangling with memories. My father's too loud greeting, my mother's careful smile, my brother's smug silence. It all clicked. I hadn't been invited home. I'd been summoned for collection. Grandpa, I whispered, why didn't you stop them? I tried, he said softly. Your mother told me to stay out of it, said I'd make things worse, but I can't keep quiet anymore. They went too far. His voice faltered. They poured wine on you, didn't they? I swallowed. Yes. The silence on the line thickened. When he spoke again, his tone carried an edge I hadn't heard since childhood. You walk away from them. You hear me? Don't let them break you for their shame. I already did, I said quietly. He sighed, long and hollow. Good. Then let me handle the rest. Grandpa, but he hung up. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. I sat there until the air turned cold enough to fog the glass again, then put the car in drive. My fingers were steady, my heart wasn't. By the time I reached Boise, the city lights looked sterile, like logic in physical form. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, stripped the wine-soaked sweater, and dropped it straight into the trash. The air in the room felt smaller than usual, like it was waiting for a decision I hadn't made yet. The next morning, I called my bank. I need to move all my funds into a new account, I told the rep. No joint access, no shared view, and no contact authorization from anyone but me. He asked if something happened. I almost laughed. You could say that. Then I spent an hour locking down every corner of my life. Passwords, credit reports, the safe deposit box. Every digital door I'd ever left cracked open, I sealed. If my sister-in-law thought she could see my balance, she'd see zeros now, just not the kind she wanted. When I finished, I stared out the window. The sky was pale gray, winter pressing its face against the city. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the same way. Anger burns hot. Betrayal freezes slow, and in that frost, something inside me hardened. 3 days later, Grandpa called again. His voice was rougher this time. "They're pretending everything's fine," he said. "Your mother's telling people you overreacted, that you made up the gambling story." I expected that. "And Dad?" "Silent. Guilt does that." He paused, then lowered his tone. "But listen, I found something else. The bank withdrawals weren't just for gambling. There were wire transfers to a woman's account in Reno, regular payments." My breath caught. "A woman?" "Her name's on the ledger, Lydia Hale. Same one who runs the private poker circles your brother used to attend." I pressed my thumb to my temple, feeling the pulse there. "So it's worse than gambling. It's laundering." "That's what it looks like." "Does Mom know?" "Not yet. She will." He hesitated. "I have spoken to the bank. Your sister-in-law's access logs show she opened your account file without authorization. That's a firing offense." I didn't know whether to thank him or to feel sick. "You're digging a war, Grandpa." He gave a dry laugh. "Then it's time someone fought clean." That evening, I opened my laptop and wrote everything down. Not for revenge, at least not entirely, but to remember. The timeline, the transfers, the words they used. Responsible, family, duty. All of it. Because if they ever tried to twist the story, I wanted my version written first. I thought about calling my mother, but what was there to say? That I finally saw the pattern? That every kind thing they'd ever said came with a clause? The truth was simpler. Love shouldn't feel like blackmail. Outside, Boise glittered faintly with early snow. I turned off the lights and let the dark fill the room. Somewhere miles away, that same darkness was wrapping itself around the house where I'd grown up. My father pacing, my mother rewriting the story, my brother pretending it wasn't his fault. But truth has a half-life. It leaks, no matter how deep you bury it. The phone buzzed again. Grandpa's name. "Rowan," he said, voice low. "I'm writing letters. To the family. To the bank. To Lydia Hale if I can find her." Mind. "Why?" "Because they think they can silence shame with silence." He paused. "And because you deserve a family that tells the truth, even if it breaks everything else first." I didn't answer right away. The quiet between us wasn't empty. It was the sound of an old man and a tired woman realizing they might be the only two Delacourts left willing to face daylight. When I finally spoke, it came out steady. "Then let's break it properly." For the first time in years, Grandpa laughed. Hoarse, relieved. "That's my girl." And just like that, the storm had a direction. But what I didn't know yet, what none of us did, was that his next letter would arrive with something attached. A clause, a signature, and a condition that would make everything unravel again. Grandpa's letter arrived a week later, postmarked from Idaho Falls, written in the kind of block handwriting that came from decades of steady patience. The envelope was thick, sealed twice. Inside was a short note for me, one photocopied document, and a folded copy of a trust addendum dated 6 months ago. "Rowan, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I've changed my estate plan. I saw what your father and brother were doing long before Thanksgiving. I warned them, but they called it family management. I call it theft. The new trust clause is conditional. I want you to know first. If they continue deceiving you, or use coercion for financial gain, everything tied to my inheritance goes to a scholarship fund in your name. If they come clean, they'll keep their share. Either way, the truth will outlast us all. GD." My breath hitched as I scanned the clause. Grandpa had given them an ultimatum wrapped in a will. It wasn't just money, it was legacy, reputation, the Delacourt name written in legal ink. He was forcing honesty through paperwork. The attached photocopy showed the same transfer receipts he'd mentioned. Wires to casinos, payments to Lydia Hale, a Reno contact number scribbled in pen at the bottom. Proof that this wasn't just rumor, it was evidence. That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone kept lighting up with messages from an unknown number. Mom wants to talk. Please pick up. We can fix this. I let them all pile up unread. Then Grandpa called again. They know I've told you, he said quietly. Your father's furious. But I'm done shielding grown men from their own reflection. You and we're going to do this clean. What are you planning? I asked. I asked them to meet me, he said. Saturday, my house. I want you there. When I arrived that weekend, the old farmhouse smelled like cedar and consequence. The dining table had been cleared except for 3 envelopes, each labeled in Grandpa's tight, deliberate handwriting. Dad, Mom, me. Dad stood by the window, jaw tight, hands clasped behind his back like he was preparing for trial. Mom sat rigid on the couch, eyes red but unreadable. My brother paced, phone clutched like a shield. My sister-in-law hovered near the doorway, the professional calm of someone who thinks apologies can be outsourced. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, cane beside him, face carved from patience and disappointment. Sit down, he said simply. No one argued. He opened the first envelope, Dad's, and laid out the casino statements for everyone to see. The silence that followed had gravity. I told you both, Grandpa began, voice low, that truth would come due. Rowan deserves to hear it from you. Dad's throat worked like he was swallowing glass. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he muttered. He promised. I promised nothing, my brother cut in sharply. You said she wouldn't refuse. You're the one who told me she'd pay. Because I thought she had decency left, Dad snapped. Mom flinched. Stop it, both of you. Her voice cracked into the tension. You're tearing this family apart. No, Grandpa said, voice like gravel. You did that when you decided her boundaries were optional. My sister-in-law's composure finally cracked. You don't understand the pressure he was under, she said. We could have lost everything, our home, our reputation. Then maybe you should have started by not stealing from it, I said quietly. Her head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. You think you're better than us? No, I said and stood, just less desperate. Dad slammed a palm against the table. Enough! This isn't a courtroom. Then why do you look so guilty? Grandpa asked. The room fell back into stunned silence. He opened the second envelope, Mom's, and slid across a copy of the revised trust. You told me family meant forgiveness, he said to her. I told you forgiveness isn't permission. You watched your husband and son plan to bankrupt your daughter, and you let it happen. Mom's lips trembled. I didn't know how to stop them. You didn't try, I said. Tears welled, but guilt sat deeper than any apology. Finally, Grandpa looked at me. The third envelope sat unopened in front of him. This one's yours, he said softly. Inside was another copy of the clause, and something new. A notarized document transferring control of the scholarship trust to me, effective immediately if he were to pass. He wasn't bluffing. He'd already put it in motion. My brother lunged forward, voice rising. You can't do that. That money's mine to give, Grandpa interrupted, and it'll go to someone who remembers what integrity looks like. I looked at the document again, my name printed beneath his signature. It felt heavier than the $250,000 notice ever had. Dad's face darkened. You're humiliating us. I'm saving what's left, Grandpa said. Then he turned to me. You have a choice, Rowan. You can cut them off entirely, or you can set terms. Real ones. The kind that don't get rewritten with guilt. I looked around the table. Dad's fury, Mom's shame, my brother's panic, my sister-in-law's fear masquerading as disdain. For the first time, I didn't feel small among them. I'll set terms, I said slowly, but they'll live in writing, not promises. What terms? Mom asked, barely above a whisper. I took a breath. Dad acknowledges the gambling and issues a written statement clearing my name. My brother signs a repayment agreement to Grandpa, not me. And your bank, I turned to my sister-in-law, files a report for unauthorized access. If you lose your job, that's between you and your conscience. She went pale. Dad scoffed. You think you can dictate our lives? No, I said calmly. Just my boundaries. Grandpa's cane tapped once against the floor. Then it settled. They comply, or the trust converts next quarter. No one spoke. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes. Inside, the family I'd spent 32 years trying to hold together finally began to fracture, honestly, this time. Mom whispered something like a prayer. My brother muttered curses under his breath, and Dad stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not rage anymore, but the hollow look of a man realizing control is a myth. When I turned to leave, Grandpa's hand caught mine. His voice was soft but firm. You did right. For the first time in years, I believed him. But as I stepped outside into the cold, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I opened the message. I know what your brother did with Lydia. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow. Noon. The Glass Hollow Cafe. LH. Lydia Hale. The name from the wire transfers. The woman at the other end of the lie. And suddenly, the family scandal wasn't just about money anymore. It was about what they'd done to hide it. The next morning, Boise felt like it had been scrubbed clean overnight. Cold air, sharp sunlight, the kind that turns everything honest. I sat in my car outside the Glass Hollow Cafe, watching condensation curl along the edges of my cup. Every instinct screamed that I should leave. Then the door opened, and she walked in. Lydia Hale didn't look like the kind of woman who'd destroy a family. She looked like someone who'd already survived one. Mid-40s maybe, sun-worn skin, deliberate movements, a quiet confidence that said she'd stopped apologizing years ago. She spotted me instantly. Rowan Delacourt, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. You look just like your grandfather described. My pulse skipped. You've spoken to him? She nodded, gloved fingers wrapping around her mug. He called me last month, after your brother's last trip to Reno, said if I didn't come forward, the wrong person would pay the price. And what exactly would I be paying for? She hesitated, eyes scanning the cafe as if the walls might be listening. Your brother didn't just gamble, Rowan. He invested, badly, in people who laundered money through poker events. I was one of them. I hosted, not the glamorous kind you see in movies. Quiet, controlled, cash-only tables that blurred the line between business and crime. I let that sink in. So he wasn't losing money, he was moving it. Both, she said. When it started to collapse, he panicked. He wired the last of it through his father's joint account, promised me he'd cover the rest through you. I stared at her. Through me? She pulled a folded paper from her purse, a signed memo, scanned and printed, dated the week before Thanksgiving. My brother's handwriting, unmistakable. Rowan will take care of it. She owes me. My breath caught. He forged my name into a debt. He didn't need your signature, Lydia said softly. Just your silence. I sank back against the chair, the room tilting. Why are you telling me this now? Because your grandfather was right. They'll destroy you if you let them. And because, she added, eyes lowering, I'm done protecting men who gamble with other people's lives. She pushed the paper across the table. You should have this. I folded it once, neatly, the way I'd done with every document in this story. What happens if I go public? Her smile was sad. They'll fall, but you'll fall with them, at least in the headlines. I can live with that, I said quietly, as long as the truth's louder. That afternoon, I drove straight to Grandpa's. The old man was sitting in his study, sunlight streaking across his worn desk. When I laid Lydia's document in front of him, he didn't look surprised. I thought as much, he murmured. He's been lying even to himself. I sat across from him. What do we do with it? He leaned back, tapping the cane once. We give them one last chance to tell the truth. Failing that, we let the law do it for them. Saturday evening, the family gathered again. Same house, same faces. None of the old illusions left. The air carried the quiet of people who knew the story was ending, one way or another. I placed Lydia's paper on the table. Recognize this? My brother's face drained. Where did you get that? From the woman you promised my money to. Dad shot him a look so sharp it could have cut glass. Tell me this is fake. It's not, Grandpa said. And if you lie again, I'll hand it to the state attorney myself. My brother started pacing. You don't understand. It wasn't like that. Then explain it, I said. He turned on me, desperation finally cracking the arrogance. I was drowning, okay? You have everything. Your job, your clean life, and I just needed one break. Lydia said she could double the investment. I just needed to keep it off the books until you got caught, I finished. He pressed a hand to his face. You think I wanted this? Dad pushed me into those deals. He said I could rebuild the family's reputation. Dad's jaw clenched. I told you to be careful, not to gamble our name. Grandpa's voice cut through the noise. Enough. You've all twisted each other's lies until none of you know which part started it. But the truth's on paper now. He nodded at me. Your move, Rowan. I looked around the room. Mom silent, eyes rimmed red. Dad staring at the floor. My brother trembling between defiance and collapse. My sister-in-law frozen, her perfect mask cracking into fear. I'm not here to ruin you, I said finally, but I won't protect you either. The only deal on the table is the one we agreed to. I set out a document of my own, a written list, notarized earlier that day. Dad signs a statement acknowledging the gambling and absolving me of all financial responsibility. My brother signs a repayment plan to Grandpa, tied to any remaining assets. My sister-in-law reports her unauthorized bank access or faces legal exposure herself. Mom writes nothing, but she stops pretending she didn't know. Grandpa slid the pen across the table. You sign now, or I execute the trust clause first thing Monday. Dad's hand hovered over the pen for a long time before he grabbed it, the weight of pride collapsing under the heavier weight of consequence. He signed. Mom followed, silent tears streaking down. My brother hesitated last, breathing hard. This will ruin me, he whispered. It already did, I said. He signed. My sister-in-law's voice broke. If I lose my job, you should have thought of that before logging into mine, I said quietly. Her hand shook as she wrote her name. When the final signature hit the page, Grandpa tapped the cane once. Done. The silence that followed was unlike any before. Not guilt, not rage, just exhaustion. Truth, in its simplest form, sitting between us, like a scar. Dad looked at me, eyes hollow. You've turned this family into a transaction. I met his gaze evenly. No, Dad, you did. I just put it in writing. Grandpa exhaled, relief tempered by sorrow. Now maybe we can start over. Maybe, I said. But I knew better than to trust beginnings born from confessions. Outside, the first snow of December began to fall, slow and unhurried, covering the driveway in white silence. As I walked out, I heard Mom whisper my name once, soft, almost childlike, but I didn't turn back. The paper was signed, the truth was sealed, and somewhere behind me, the Delacourt house was finally learning what consequences sound like. Yet as the wind caught the edge of my coat, one thought trailed me like breath in the cold. Grandpa's health had been failing. If he didn't make it through the winter, the trust, and every ounce of power, would soon belong to me. And I wasn't sure whether that was justice or a curse. Grandpa passed away 3 weeks later, quietly, in his sleep, the way he used to say he wanted. No noise, no spectacle, just an honest exit. The call came at dawn. Mom's voice trembled through the phone. Half grief, half something else, maybe fear. I drove back to Idaho Falls under a slate-colored sky, snow dusting the highway shoulders. The world felt muted, like it understood silence was the only proper language left between us. When I arrived, the house was crowded but cold. Casseroles on the counter, relatives whispering in corners, faces that avoided mine like I carried contagion. Dad stood by the window again. Black suit, unreadable stare. My brother looked smaller somehow, his bravado stripped away. My sister-in-law wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom approached with a tissue crushed in her hand. He loved you, you know, she said softly. I know, I replied. He proved it. Her eyes glistened. He left letters, one for each of us. She handed me mine, a simple white envelope with my name in that same careful block handwriting. I didn't open it there, not in that room, not under their gaze. I read it later, sitting in my car outside the church. Rowan, you did what I couldn't. You held a mirror up to this family and made them look. That takes courage and loneliness in equal measure. Don't let either define you. The trust is yours now, not as punishment for them, but as protection for you. Use it wisely. Make something that outlives anger. That's the real inheritance. GD. Tears blurred the ink before I could stop them. Not the kind that begged for sympathy, the kind that released something years of restraint had kept buried. I folded the letter and slipped it into my coat pocket. Outside, the church bell tolled once, the sound carrying across the frozen street like an old secret finally allowed to speak. 2 months passed. Boise thawed slowly, the river cutting silver paths through the ice. My routines returned. Morning runs, late-night work, quiet meals. But everything felt different now. Because now I wasn't just surviving my family's mess. I was deciding what to do with what was left of it. The trust funds cleared mid-February, my name on every line, my control, absolute. The number glowed on my screen, a sum that could change a life, or a legacy. I didn't touch it for a week. Then, one night, I called Aunt Martha. Grandpa wanted it to go somewhere honest, I said. He'd be proud of that, she replied. So I did it. I founded the Delacorte Foundation, a scholarship for first-generation students from rural Idaho, the kind of kids who worked twice as hard and were told that being responsible meant carrying everyone else's weight. I wanted them to have what I never did, permission to choose themselves. News traveled fast. Mom sent a short email. He'd like that. Dad didn't write at all. My brother tried. A stumbling apology, part confession, part plea. He'd entered counseling, sold the car, started working again. The words felt honest but fragile. "I'm sorry," he wrote. "You were right. I just didn't want to see it." I typed a reply, deleted it twice, then wrote simply, "Start by staying clean. The rest will follow." We haven't spoken since, but sometimes silence is the most respectful kind of peace there is. Spring arrived early that year. Boise's Riverwalk bloomed with wildflowers. I started running again, really running, the kind that feels like exhaling months of weight. I kept Grandpa's cane by the door, a quiet reminder that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands its ground. And on certain mornings, when sunlight hit the window just right, I'd catch my reflection in the glass. Older, sharper, but still recognizably me. And I'd think about that night in Idaho Falls. The paper box, the wine, the moment everything broke open. I used to believe family was about loyalty. Now I think it's about truth and the courage to live with it. If you're watching this and you've ever been told that family means sacrifice, remember this. Sacrifice should never mean yourself. Sometimes walking away isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the only honest way to stay whole. My name is Rowan Delacorte, and this is where my story finally ends. Not in bitterness, but in balance. Because peace isn't inherited, it's earned.